Hello, it's Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me today. And today we are going to be looking at how tuning has just changed forever. Vocal tuning, AI has changed it. There is this small, subtle, yet I think kind of monumental shift that has just gone on with the way that we're going to be tuning vocals from now on into the future. AI, it's one of those things that sounds scary. It sounds like it can only be used unethically. I don't know. I'm not super afraid of AI. When tractors got invented, it's true that there were a lot of farmers that got put out of work by tractors, but people went on to do other things. And I think that AI largely is going to, when used well, free us up from things that we don't need to be doing to do things that we could be doing. But there's also just ways to use it like creatively. It doesn't have to be this job destroying thing. And today we're going to look at, I think, one of the most creative ways to use AI vocal replacement. I'm going to be opening up the Pro Tools screen here to give you some before and after examples. And I'll also bring up this service here that we looked at a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago. I did a sneak peek at this service from a company called Audimee. And if you're not familiar with them, Audimee have this AI vocal kind of resynthesis algorithm. And basically what it allows you to do is that you can take any recorded vocal and then completely transform the singer. So you could take a male vocal input and change it to a female singer. You can take a female vocal input, change it to a male vocal, but you can take a male vocal, change it to a male vocal of a totally different type. So they have this whole library of voices that they've created, basically these AI models of voices. And you can change your voice or another singer's voice into someone else's voice. It doesn't necessarily do tuning when it does that, but this is the thing that they've started to add on. And this is the first that I've seen this, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it. It is tuning capability built into the vocal synthesis algorithm. Why is this interesting? Why is this important? Why is this different? Why is this going to change tuning forever? We're going to talk about all that and more. But before I do, I just want to give you the quick overview of how software systems like this one work if you're not too familiar with it. So if I go in here into Audimee, you can upload any audio. I'm going to go in here and just grab an audio file. Let's see, which one should I use? Check out this one.
In my soul.
Yeah, let's grab this one. So here's a simple vocal bit.
Burning in my soul.
But I could convert this to be another female singer. I can convert it to be a male vocal. I can convert it to have any kind of timbre that I want. And I can also create my own voice models, my own vocal engines. And there's also some really interesting applications here where you could create models of things like violins and saxophones and use vocal inputs to trigger those instruments. Here's a quick before and after. Here's a before and after example they have up on their page. Here is a raw input.
Give me what I've needed. I don't want to be alone.
And here is it changed.
Give me what I've needed. I don't want to be alone.
So pretty persuasive female to male voice change and completely different timbre. But what we're now able to do potentially is to use a pitch editor that allows us, instead of retuning the input, which is one of the applications that I thought of here, is creating vocal harmonies by retuning the input. So we could sing one vocal line, and I can sing maybe multiple vocal lines, and then have a different singer's voice for each one of these vocal harmonies. So instead of doing vocal harmony stacks where you have the same singer voice again and again stacked on top of itself, which can sound kind of artificial, and it can be a cool sound. It's a sound that's been used a lot in modern music production. But if you want these kinds of richer harmonies and more old school feeling harmonies that allow you to have multiple different voices without bringing in multiple different singers, this is something you could do with Audimee, right? You could record yourself potentially recording 4-part harmony and then resynthesize each one of those lines into a different type of voice. Or you could have one person be able to do really convincing gang vocals that really does sound like a group of disparate people in a space instead of just a whole bunch of you. To give you a quick before and after example, I'll go over to my Pro Tools screen here and pull up some of these examples. Here is a vocal harmony. This was created with Audimee, where everything to me sounds, this is the sound of kind of stacking one voice, one on top of the other, on top of the other. Here it is with no harmonies.
For all the times that you rain on my parade.
And here it is now with a whole bunch of harmonies stacked.
For all the times that you rain on my parade.
Now, it's a cool sounding vocal harmony, but it has that effect, that feeling of really being just one vocalist. And you can tell it's all from the same take, so it sounds a little bit digital, and it's so well tuned that there's this kind of synthy aspect to it. But it's cool. But we don't necessarily have to do this kind of tuning. Let's hear that one more time.
For all the times that you rain on my parade.
And here's our after.
For all the times that you rain on my parade.
So almost eerily well tuned. But check out this slightly different take on vocal harmonization. Here's our before.
Not too late to chase the sun. Just you wait. Change is gonna come.
And our after.
Not too late to chase the sun. Just you wait. Change is gonna come.
So there, I think you get the vibe of there being more than one type of voice in this. Listen again to the lowest register in here compared to the highest register, and you can tell there's more than one vocal model in here. Here's again our before.
Not too late to chase the sun.
And our after.
Not too late to chase the sun. Just you wait. Change is gonna come.
So these are some of the kinds of possibilities that you could do in here. Can you do this already with multiple takes and multiple vocalists? Absolutely. I mean, first of all, one of the things that's been being done for ages is just to have one singer stack themselves and do 4-part, 5-part, 6-part harmonies of just their voice. But this ability to have multiple voices doing it is a big thing. But this is old news. We've covered this before a little while back. What's newer news is the ability to now do more extreme vocal tuning than ever before off of just a single take and have that vocal tuning still sound remarkably natural. Because what we're able to do with this type of tool is instead of tuning the input and then putting out a new output, we can essentially say to the voice model, the AI voice model, we can say, hey, sing different notes. What would your voice model sound like if you were singing different notes? So we can create an interaction between the tuning and the voice model itself to get more accurate, more realistic sounding tuning changes, even if we're doing relatively extreme tuning changes. Because what current tuners are good at doing is if you need to slip something by a half step or a full step, they can sound pretty accurate. But if you want to do changes of a fifth or an octave, these don't always sound particularly accurate in conventional vocal tuners. But I think you can hear in this prior example that we did, let me just play that one more time, just how much lower the bottom vocal is in this Pro Tools example. One more time. Just the ability, this is not a different take. This is just a retuned vocal.
Not too late.
Versus.
Not too late.
I mean, that does not sound like a copy of a vocal and then tuning it afterwards. It's just, it's too clean. All right, let's go back into my Safari screen real quick, and we'll play around with one of these in real time. So I just brought this one up. And if you'll remember, what this sounded like on input was this.
Burning in my soul.
And if I go into the pitch editor that's here in Audimee, it'll go ahead and convert this audio, and it'll bring up a screen that looks a lot like Melodyne, if you're familiar with that, where we can just go ahead and click and drag notes and put them anywhere. But we're actually going to get a preview here where we'll be hearing the changed voice. I think I have the default male voice up here, so we'll probably get a high male voice here. Let's hear it.
Burning in my soul.
Whoa, that's a guy singing falsetto near the top of his range right there. Maybe we should pick a female vocalist, or we could pitch this whole thing down for this male vocalist. I mean, one thing I could do here is I could just grab, let's see, this whole note right here, and let's take this whole thing and slide it up. You know, I didn't check what the key on this is. Right now, this is a B. Let's see what this note sounds like. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but if we move it all the way up to like D sharp, I'm just guessing here. This might be awful, but let's hear. It'll take a second to process. Ooh, no. D sharp is a good call. All right. My guess wasn't too bad. So this is taking this guy even closer to the top of his range. Let's hear that D sharp one more time. Burning in my soul. And of course, in addition to this, we have the ability to increase or flatten out vibrato like we'd expect in a regular tuner. So here it is, totally robotized, going really flat. Burning in my soul. Right? That's a very tuned sounding vocal now. I'll go ahead and undo that vibrato change, see if I can bring us back to our prior state. And I think that's about right. And yeah, that's about where it was, I think. We can also lock it more to the pitch. Again, I'm going to really exaggerate this. This might end up, since I haven't put in a scale yet, which I can go over here, over to key, and I'll conform it to a key. So this might cause us some issues if I don't yet select a key, but let's just hear it. Burning in my soul. And that is even more of a pitch-corrected vocal. So we could do the same kind of thing with other type of voice models, or we could put this singer into more comfortable register for him. I'm going to back off on some of these pitch changes I made really quick. And let's take the same note. What do we have here? We had a C. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to select this whole thing right here. Man, what would be a good note to try? Let's see if we drop this down, like a fourth, down to an F. Let's hear what this sounds like. Here's our after. Burning in my soul. Clearly, this note here would absolutely have to change. Maybe throwing it around here. And this is probably way too low of a note for this melody. In my soul. And this would have to come down even further. And let's bring this guy down here. And I'm just doing this all online. I'm in Safari right now. I'm in my browser doing this tuning. And you see how quick it's processing? This is pretty remarkable. Burning in my soul. And man, this note, too high here at the end. Let's bring this down. Let's have him sing something a little bit straighter. What if we come here and we come about here? And I'm not even really doing any pitch correction at this moment. I'm just moving around notes. Burning in my soul. Clearly I could have made a better choice on this note right here. But I think you get the idea of just how easy this is to edit. I can also go in here and click and separate regions. There's a vibrato editor here as well, where I can change the vibrato line. There's this drift editor so that I can grab notes and move them up and down slightly rather than moving the whole note. So I can move it within a semitone here in the drift mode. And there's this cut mode where now I can actually cut these into additional notes. So I could take some of the sustain and add additional cuts and create new notes out of it. So all of this kind of stuff that I can do. And just as a reminder, our original input sounded like this.
Burning in my soul.
Obviously, we could do this with any number of different singers. Doesn't have to be a male voice. Let's take a different female voice. And I'll see if I can upload maybe a slightly different clip. What else do I got here? I have some more of these examples. Let's try this one. This one.
Still in love.
This is, you can tell, a fairly badly recorded vocal, and that there's all this additional room tone in here.
Still in love.
But if we put it in here, it's going to replace it with the sound of someone who's recorded in a good sounding room environment on a good mic. So here's our before again.
Still in love.
Let's go ahead into the pitch editor. It'll take a sec to convert the audio. And here's again our whole note layout. And let's hear our after.
Still in love.
So you can really tell that immediately it sounds like so much more up close. We get rid of all of that ambience around the voice. It sounds like it's on a better mic. Right now, this AI model isn't doing particularly well with getting all of the consonants correct on this particular line. Let's hear that again.
Standing now.
Now, I didn't really pick up the V in love. So there's some things that you can do here to play around with. And that's where some of the more fine tuning comes in. We can go here, and I actually have conversion strength set here to 0%. We can change this conversion strength. That can sometimes help us out. Also, we might have slightly worse results when we're dealing with vocals that have too much ambience in them. There are these options to remove reverb and echo. So this can give us better results if we have a really badly recorded vocal that's a little bit too roomy and it's throwing the algorithm off. We can try this. We can try removing noise, removing background vocals. There's a remove instrumental function in here. So there's things we can play around with. And they also do give you this guideline on how things can sound. So this is, again, an ideal example of decently dry vocal.
Give me what I've needed.
And then the output you get from that.
Give me what I've needed.
But if you have something with a lot of effects on it, like check this out.
Give me what I've needed.
And you take that and you put it through, here are the kinds of artifacts you might hear.
Gives me what I've needed.
Right? The give changes to gives, and we start to hear a little bit of additional artifacting in there. But we can do, there's so much cool stuff in here. We don't necessarily have to grab some of these voices. We can actually go into instruments, which often has been a fun thing for me. I'm going to grab, this saxophone. Let's grab this guy. And let's hear what this input sounds like changed to a saxophone. Here we are again in Pitch Editor. And it should give me a preview of what this voice would sound like reimagined as a sax. I mean, come on. Isn't it and imagine if this person was actually trying to mimic the sound of a saxophone and then we ran it through. I mean, I still get that hint of hearing Still in Love, but this really does sound like a saxophone. So here, again, if I want to totally change the phrase the sax is playing, we can do that. I can take these notes. Let's see what's happening with this kind of note in between. Nah, that's not even a change in note. It's really just a change in the riffing. It's just like high, like heavy vibrato. Right now, automatically, it has me in this preview mode where when I click on a note, it's playing me what the note is. I can turn that off here. And I'm going to go ahead and select this whole note. And let's bring this up. I'm just going to take a guess here. Just kind of looking at G, F. Let's see what this would sound like at a B. A B flat. Let's hear that. And again, take a second to process. Not bad. And I have played around with this thing, and I'd encourage you to just how much cleaner and how much more realistic it sounds when you do big leaps of things like a fifth or an octave when you're tuning that a lot of regular tuners don't do as well. If you want to do radical retuning, like completely change a phrase, and you want to get into like compositional mindset, where you take guitar lines that people have played, sax lines that people have played, vocal lines from samples. You could take sampled vocals and then resynthesize that vocal sample and then retune that vocal sample and resynthesize it into a new voice or a new instrument. These are some of the creative applications I think that are available here. So the two big ones for me, just to recap, and then we'll start shutting it down soon. I'll take your questions if you guys have any. If you're interested in trying out these tools for yourself, a big thanks to Audimee for supporting this channel. They are giving subscribers of SonicScoop a 20% discount off of any subscriptions to the Audimee service. I believe it's they're giving 20% off with discount code SonicScoop. So go over to audimee.com, put in SonicScoop at checkout. You can get a 20% discount on any of that stuff. There's also a generous free trial in here. But the two big applications for me, again, are this kind of reharmonization where you could sing potentially one vocal line and then just start experimenting with, all right, let me spit out the same vocal line that I sang in a few different harmonies. And rather than it just sounding like me, let's have it sound like other voices. Now, you could make it sound like you, and the way that you would do that is you can create your own voice model with Audimee. I thought that's something that's cool that I haven't seen on some of these other services, where you can record, 5-10 minutes of you singing, and then upload that, and then the AI will create a voice model based on you. So you can replace other people's voices with your voice. You could take like an actually good singer and replace them with your voice. That would be like, next generation Milli Vanilli. We might have to watch out for unethical ways of this being used. But we heard on the last stream when I checked out this stuff, me taking like Judy Garland and who else did I do? Freddie Mercury, and then changing their voice to my voice. So it sounds like me, but with the singing ability of Freddie Mercury or Judy Garland, which I do not have. Admittedly. So, but you could do that with your own voice. You could create your own voice model of you and then have this tuning that interacts with the voice model. So you can do really radical retuning of yourself without it sounding super duper artifacty. Now, the one caveat I will give is that I think that the creating your own voice model, I don't think the voice models I've made of myself worked quite as well as the voice models that these guys have created and curated. Their curated list of voice models, there's scores of singers in there and probably almost a dozen instruments in there. Those, I think, work slightly better than the ones I made. And I don't know if that's because there's a learning curve to making your own voice model, or if just the full brunt of the technology isn't there yet for you doing it to your own voice, but is a possibility, and it sounded reasonably good, just not as clean as some of, or really the majority of their voice models. But here's use case number one, taking you singing a vocal line.
Not too late to chase the sun.
And turning that into gang vocals, reharmonized significantly with just one take.
Not too late to chase the sun.
And even if you go and replace these with real vocalists later on, it's still just like an amazing sketch pad for harmonizing. Like, hey, what kinds of voices should I do? And I'm trying to write for 4-part harmony. And the singers in our band, we've got 2 female singers and 2 male singers. Let me experiment with that and hear what it would really sound like with 2 male voices and 2 female voices. And if you wanted to go even further to make this sound even less robotic, if that was the goal, you could still take that one take and then also do a little bit of time shifting, where you could take each of the notes, after you've retuned them, and make it so they don't line up completely. Because a super well lined up vocal, when you take it from both a tuning perspective and a timing perspective, sounds like this, going from this
For all the times that you rain on my parade.
To something like this.
For all the times that you rain on my parade.
Right, where that sounds almost like a voice organ. There's no collection of human voices that would sound like this. Whereas this one really does get closer to sounding like a collection of human voices. And we could dirty it up a little bit more by shifting and drifting each of these voices just a tiny bit more off of being perfect, both in the time domain and in the pitch domain. But this does have that effect, that impression of a real group of vocal harmonies.
Not too late to chase the sun.
So that, I think, is creative application number one for this kind of radical retuning ability, where you can make bigger jumps than before with less artifacting than before. The vocal harmonization thing, absolutely big. Producers, singers should be using these kinds of tools. Number two is this idea now of taking samples. Like, you can get inspiration from a vocal sample. And instead of using that same exact vocal sample that everyone and their mother has access to, you can now take that, change the instrument or voice that vocal sample is being done with. Change the voice to a saxophone or a distorted electric guitar line. Or even if you keep it as a similar sounding voice, you could totally repitch this voice, change the melody in that vocal sample. So this is one of those things where adding this additional technology can be used in ways that make things less creative and less interesting and more robotic and less inspired. But if you think about this stuff in a creative way, I think this is one of these applications where a new technology comes along and takes old technologies and makes them even more creative. Because in the past, a lot of people were making sample-based music off of samples that everyone and their mother could get. People have the same access to the same samples as you, potentially. But what if you could recreate samples and sample-based music, completely change them so that they become your own sample, so that they become something that you are creating musically, that you're actually adding to, enhancing, changing, reworking things that already exist, instead of just using them a la carte and just completely just blanket remixing already existing stuff? What if you could go beyond remixing and into recomposing, which is what I think a tool and a technology like this allows us to do. There's other, use cases that we talked about last time, things like making demos for one type of artist. If you're a male singer and you're writing songs for female singers, wanting to hear it that way. Doing creative guitar solos where you play a kazoo with your mouth and then reimagine it with weird guitar sounds that would be difficult to get with a real guitar or some other instrument. These splits that you can do where you can create models that's like half the timbre of a saxophone and half the timbre of an electric guitar, or half the timbre of a flute and half the timbre of a violin. Creating new models where you combine together existing models. And that's something that Audimee lets you do in this mixed voices section. Creating your own models of weird instruments that you can then trigger with your own voice or with any other instrument you can play well. You can play guitar well, but you want it to trigger a flute. You could potentially use something like Audimee for that. So those are some of my key takeaways here. The big thing here is this tuning ability. There is this quick tuning in here where you can, flatten out vibrato or increase vibrato. There is this pitch functionality where you can just select a key. Say we're in C major and we just want everything to conform a little bit more to C major. So just really quickly and easily, without even going into this vocal editor, we can just say, hey, we want this incoming signal to be more tuned. Select the correct key for it, and then select how strong you want this to be. And if you want to preview what this sounds like before hitting the output, you just go over here to Pitch Editor, and it will preview those small changes that you've made. You don't have to go into this full-on Melodyne style editor. One of the other things, a question here, why do this through a software-based, a cloud-based tool? This is a browser-based tool. Audimee is not a plugin in your computer right now, although I know that that's something that I think that they're working on. But even if we were to get an Audimee plugin tomorrow, it would still be connecting to the cloud. And why is that? Why is it potentially a benefit to have this thing be browser-based and connected to the internet rather than having some plugin that would just live inside your DAW and work off of your computer? And the answer to that is an AI that is powerful enough to do the kind of stuff that we're doing today basically needs to be hosted on a supercomputer. And what this is allowing you to do is tap into a supercomputer. Because the kinds of single note changes that I made, if we're doing those through an AI and to hear it resynthesized in real time, like I would have to make a one note change on this pitch editor and then maybe wait 5 minutes to hear the preview. Even if you have a really, really powerful computer, I have a Mac Studio here, which is pretty powerful. I just got it, so my streams don't choke out anymore. But if you have a Mac Pro or whatever, custom PC build you're doing on your side, even really powerful desktops today just don't have the power to quickly and easily do this kind of AI processing. So that's the basic sell for why Audimee is browser-based and why it's going to stay browser-based. And sometimes when people come to me with the idea of, hey, Justin, there's plugins that can do this. I have a plug in my DAW that does vocal synthesis. Usually what they're talking about is something different. And that is something like a text-to-speech synthesizer, where you can essentially put in text and then give it a series of notes to play. You put in text and MIDI, and then it can spit out a synthesized vocal performance of that text and MIDI. That can be done on your own computer. And it's relatively easy, I think, to change, the actual MIDI input that's going into it. There's ways to preview what the melody line is going to sound like. But with this kind of tool, where we are taking existing audio, not MIDI, and then resynthesizing that existing audio, that technology just isn't going to be available on your desktop computer, much less your smartphone, for quite some time. The estimates I've gotten, this is like a 3 to 5 years out kind of thing, that you could potentially have this kind of power as an application on your computer that would function at reasonable speeds for creative music production. It's not to say that you couldn't have your computer do this, but again, it's one of those things where you'd be waiting for maybe several minutes to hear just the change of one note instead of what we got here, which is several seconds. The round trip back and forth, uploading this audio, processing in the supercomputer and hearing it back is just quicker than what you'd be able to do processing on your own machine. So if and when I would say we do see a plugin or standalone software from Audimee, it'll be web connected for now. But talking to these guys, I think that once computers get fast enough that you could run this kind of processing natively, I think they'd be all about making something like that would run natively. But that answers the question of why browser-based, why subscription model, and why not just a buy-it-once plugin in my DAW. I think that's about all I have to say on this matter, but I want to check in and see if you guys have any comments here. Let's get a sense for what some folks are saying here, and then I'll end the stream. We're about a half an hour in here. And here are some of the comments. Let's see. Whoa, you guys have been really killing it in the comments. I don't know if I can get through all of these. Berlin says there are AI voice services for this already. In fact, there's even a VST for this. And I think I just addressed that. The VSTs that I know of, and correct me if I'm wrong, put it in there if you think that there is a VST plugin that does this, takes not a MIDI input, not MIDI and text, but takes a voice and then like a pre-recorded waveform voice and then changes it practically instantly and allows you to tune it with the at the AI level rather than just pre-tuning it and then running that pre-tuned thing through the AI or running through the AI and then taking the output and tuning that. Like actually saying to the AI, sing a different note and make that sound natural. That's a little bit different. And I don't know of anything native yet that's a VST that does exactly what we're looking at here. I know of things that are parallel to it that take text and MIDI input, but I don't know of this. Let me know if you guys think that's wrong. And if you have something that does exactly this, let me know in the comments. I will look into it. But I was looking around and did not find it. There are other somewhat similar things I've seen as online services. There's a few other companies that are doing them, but they are all online. I'm not going to name other ones right now out of deference to Audimee, who are giving a 20% discount to people with discount code SonicScoop, thanking those guys for supporting the channel. But some other video, some other day, we can talk about and compare all the different ones. I would say out of all the ones that I've tried, and I've tried about 4 of them now, this is probably the most robust. But there's one that I think is almost as good as this one, and a couple others that I don't think are as useful for music production that have more celebrity voices, or they're more about speechifying, or they have like novelty voices rather than like well-produced like vocals with the features that would be appropriate for a music production context. Here Berlin saying Nectar 4 plugin voice does the same thing. Again, it doesn't. It doesn't do this. You can't do this inside your voice with Nectar that I know of. If someone wants to correct me on that, if you can take pre-recorded audio and run that through Nectar and have it resynthesized, let me know. Or are you talking about text and MIDI? That would be interesting. All right. Or are you talking about Nectar can do tuning? Yes, Nectar can do tuning. So you can do tuning with a whole bunch of things inside your DAW. What you can't necessarily do is, I think, the quality and transparency of tuning is the big change here. So maybe this is something I didn't harp on enough in the beginning, is that maybe I should have given you some back-to-back examples. Like we could load up Melodyne and take the vocal output of this, like take the outputted AI vocal, run that through Melodyne, and then try doing the vocal tuning through this online app and do really significant retuning, like shift things down an octave, shift things down a fifth, change a leap that was a third to like a ninth, and see if Melodyne or Autotune would do that as well as this AI does that. And I think that the answer is going to be no. If you can prove me wrong on that, again, I want to hear from you in the comments. Go ahead and do this. Use a free trial of Audimee. Use the tuning function in it to retune a vocal, and then do the same thing. Take the same output and do the same dramatic retuning in something like Melodyne or Autotune or Crispy Tuner. And let me know that if you're changing things by a fifth, an octave, a ninth, a 13th, that it's going to sound as transparent as this does. And that, I think, is the difference. And that is really what requires resynthesis to work, because what happens when you're using a conventional vocal tuner is that you're taking the pre-recorded audio, like that audio waveform, and changing its pitch. This is not doing that. This is spitting out an AI model of a different pitch being sung. Entirely different. And the timbre is going to be much more realistic and much more natural with this kind of technology, both in principle and, I think, if you try for yourself, in fact. And please do try it for yourself. Go over to audimee.com, and if you believe that you can do these big changes the same way, let me know. I want to hear it. Bradley says, showed up a little late, but excited to be here. Thanks for your genius, Justin. You're the man. I don't know about that, Bradley, but thanks so much. I appreciate it. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Jedediah says, oh my God, that's wild. Was that the vocal into a sax? Yeah, that's one of my favorite tricks with this thing, is using the instrument resynthesis. Who else? Man, there's so many comments here. I don't think I can get through all of them, but I will read through them at the end. And yeah, I'd be really curious. It looks like there's one commenter in here, Berlin, who is not impressed, but there's a lot of other people in here who are very impressed. So again, I think the not being impressed would come from a misunderstanding. If you think that you can do this with current vocal tuners, don't think that's the case. And if you think you can do this with vocal synthesizers that are VST based, again, don't think it's the case. All right. Berlin, though, is going to take the challenge. Our naysayer in here says he's going to do the free trial and he wants to see if he can impress himself with it. That's what I want to see. I want to see you guys trying this stuff out for yourself. Like, if you want to poo-poo these new AI tools, which possibly could be the answer for you, it could be that AI has no place in the way you want to do things. Maybe you actually want to go as far as, let's go back a tick and do everything on 4-track reel-to-reel. Like, totally fine. This is valid. Like, you want to do everything on 8-track reel-to-reel, also fine. You want to do things like direct to wax cylinder. I'm here for it. And I will give you music production advice on how to do things direct to wax cylinder. I'm all for it. But I think you should know what these tools are capable of, what changes are happening in music, and to at least think through, thought experiment of how you might use these tools if you were going to use them. And that's my ask for you today. All right, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me. Again, put into links or email me at podcast@sonicscoop.com if you think you can do this with tools that you have in your DAW. I'm going to say very high confidence, 98.9% sure that you're not going to be able to get this transparency in tuning that you can get with this kind of voice modeling by another means. If you can, though, totally want to hear it. Give me the back-to-back comparison and try this out. Try resynthesizing your voice in other instruments. Try creating your own AI models and try this harmony function. I think that's going to be the most interesting and useful thing here. You want to check it out, go over to audimee.com, enter the code SonicScoop at checkout for 20% off subscriptions. Thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.